friends, Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa String Works workshop. It'll be the first time that I've attempted to build two mandolins at the very same time. Here's the beginnings of mandolin number one. This one's going to the UK. There's a nice fellow over there, and I believe his mother is also very interested in this project. So I've got this one started a little bit further along. The other one is being glued up right now. Tomorrow I'll try to get it caught up to this point right here. And then we're going to try to keep them together all the way through the process. So I hope you enjoy what you're about to see. Thanks for tuning in, and tell your friends about the channel. If you're not subscribed, be sure to click that subscribe button. Be sure to ring the bell so that you'll be notified whenever I put out new videos. Let's get into the project. Well, we're about ready to pattern the Florida mandolin here. I'm trying to bring it up to get up to where we're at on the United Kingdom mandolin. Lining up my pattern here, trying to get it as precise as possible before I draw around it. I'm going to draw around it with a magic marker, and it broadens the line, and I'm going to cut outside the line to give myself a little bit more room this time. I have been cutting it too close on a few of them, and it's just making it hard to work with, so no point in making it hard on myself. When I go inside the scroll, I'll switch to the pencil because the scroll is a little more detailed. And just in case anybody would think I could get confused, number one, the UK mandolin, the pattern goes at a slight V, a very slight V. This one's almost directly across, although there is a slight V to it as well. But I also have written UK here and UK here on the inside, and that way I shouldn't get them confused. Those two will go together, and these two will, and I'll do the same thing on this when I get it that far along. Now the problem with this is, it's really hard to see the line on this wood here, so I think I'm going to mark the line with pencil on the ends. It's really hard to see it, in fact. Don't really need the line all the way, just enough to line up my pattern. This part here, I like to leave this a little large, so I'll leave that up there like that. So I've got them both roughed out to about the same spot. As I mentioned, the UK mandolin here has the UK in the thing, and then this one has Florida in this one. They're both going to be really fine mandolins. I think because the UK mandolin order came in first, I will work on it. You know, I will do the operation on it, then do the operation on that one, and operation here, operation there. And that's the way I'm going to proceed throughout the whole build, I think. Thanks to my wonderful viewer friend for sending me this rough out plane. That's what I call it, even though it's a little tiny palm plane. It's great for roughing out. It's not, for my purposes, it's not good for detail carving, but it's good for just getting rid of hogging out the wood and that type of thing. So that's what we're doing here first anyway. I've got it razor sharp. As you may have seen in another video, I modified it significantly. I changed the angle so that it matched the other angle of the other planes, and that, to me, has made it carve a lot better. And it could just be that I'm used to working at that angle. I don't know. But perhaps if you got used to this one working at the angle it was manufactured at, it might be fine too. But for me, having it match the angle of the other planes just seems to make sense. Not going to show all this detail carving because it just takes too much time and just eats up so much video space. Show you what it looks like when we get to the next phase. Well, that gets it roughed out pretty good. Not, it's not perfect. We're about ready to take the plane, this has teeth on this plane here. Maybe you can see those teeth. Now I'm going to go over it, and this is what we call the leveling plane. These little teeth will let you cut in almost any direction, and they get rid of the ridges and the bumps. Tooth plane to smooth it out. Although there's still some detail to put in here yet. We don't have much of a swale in there yet, so we may come back to the regular plane for that a little bit. Everything that's real gradual flexes better, and that flexing is what makes that wood vibrate. Checking for symmetry to see if it's carved the same on both sides. It looks really good. I've got a little bit of addition here yet, but I don't have much, and I don't put a lot, I'll be honest, but I do put some. And the thing is, again, I don't like it to be abrupt, because abruptness means it doesn't vibrate. That's just all it means. So we want it to feather in. It's pretty good. It's really nice. The inside is still flat. I always like to carve the outside first and make sure I'm happy with the outside before I carve the inside. That's the UK mandolin hit ready for scraping. The finer grain is stronger, which would tell you that it probably wouldn't vibrate as much, but you carve it thinner so you get a nice thin strong top, and that's what I'm after. And now we've got the regular plane here that will just carve in the detail now. This plane here is very, very good for getting it roughed out. Doesn't hurt your fingers at all. Already I can feel this one hurting my fingers. Of course, I already carved that other top just a few minutes ago, so you know, my fingers are pretty sore. Doesn't take long to carve with these things if you know how to use them. They're not easy to use. Once you learn how, though, they sure do carve. My goal is to make them look identical. When they're done, you won't hardly be able to tell one from the other. This one, by the way, again, just for the record, is the Florida mandolin. What I do here is I take my calipers and make a mark at the 250 thousandths place, which comes out even there. I try to carve it to that mark until I get about around here to the end, and then it gradually tapers up. That way that binding looks the same all the way around here, and it makes the binding easier too, and then the binding will flare up at the end here. I'm going to weigh them both. I thought it would be kind of interesting to see what they weigh. I have a feeling this one, the UK one, probably weighs a little bit more at the moment. It feels like maybe I need to carve a little bit more, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Let's see. 256 grams. That's the UK mandolin, 256. Florida mandolin on here. And 222. So yeah, roughly 30 grams more. I don't feel like I'm done with either one of them yet. This is just kind of the early on check. They're still both what I would refer to as rough carved. I haven't scraped either one of them yet. In case anybody's wondering, yes, they are the same thickness. I checked that within thousandths of inches. I mean, they're very, very, very close. Gonna be a whole lot more of that to do, so we'll show you what it looks like when we're caught up to that point. Well, before we start carving the inside, the final numbers on this, just so you know, I mean, seriously, they're within about 1,000th or 2 thickness. In terms of thickness, they're almost identical. In terms of weight, this one, the UK mandolin weighs a little bit more. I don't know why exactly. It weighs about 12 grams more. I feel like they're carved pretty much identical. If anything, I carved maybe a little bit more off the UK mandolin to get it that close. They're within about 12 grams, which is roughly half an ounce, if that, in terms of weight. They feel about the same. The sound is a little different. This one has a fairly deep ping. This one has a much higher ping, I'll admit. But it's noticeably different. This one's a much lower note than this one is at the moment. But we'll see how that all comes out in the wash as we go through it. I thought it would be interesting to see how much the backs weigh. Now keep in mind, this is, they've already been rough carved with the grinder, so it's, anybody's guess how much I carved away from one than the other, so I could have easily changed that a lot, but let's just see how close they are. And we're in grams again. That's 422 grams, and that's the UK mandolin. 448 grams. Just thought you might find that interesting. This was a C-sharp note. Before I started carving the back on the UK mandolin, it was a B note. So anyway, B to C-sharp. Now I've carved most of the inside of this one out. Therefore, I'm really curious when we get it down to the final details on both of them, how that note is going to change. And this will be the first time I've ever been able to see that and compare it, because I've never built 2 at one time. So I'm very curious about that. Hello friends, we're going to interrupt this video for a viewer appreciation gift. It came from a Mr. David Hart in Indianapolis, Indiana. And David, thank you very much for the gift. I appreciate that. I'm building twin mandolins as we speak, so this gift is very timely. He sent me a nice note, said he likes my videos and the educational part of them and all that, and he's learned a lot. And he said this gift is a 1/4 scale mandolin that he has here for me. Obviously, he has a business making these things. It came in this cool little box called Axe Heaven, by the way, the name of his business. I'm sure you can Google that. And inside there was this neat little outfit. He said his daughter even customized it with a deer antler saddle, so you can see the white saddle there. And it came with a real neat little stand that's adjustable to fit it. So I really appreciate that. Thank you very much, David. He sent a whole brochure of a lot of electric guitars and things that he makes. So facebook.com/axeheaven, twitter.com/axeheaven, and www.axeheaven.com. So I'm sure you can look it up if you're into that sort of thing, getting a model of your guitar. Maybe he can do that for you. Thanks again, David. It's been several days since I've worked on this, but I've got the carving in here close. I wouldn't call it right yet. I mean, I still have to get down with the calipers and really check the thickness all over, but it's getting close, and the note has dropped a lot. I haven't checked the note yet, but this used to be a C sharp, and now it's way down. Much deeper note. This one's still a much higher note. I think you can probably tell the difference. So now we're going to get started cutting out the rest of it here. The inside's getting pretty thin. I don't typically give out the measurements for the inside or for these tops and backs. That's the one little secret I kind of keep to myself. I will tell you this though, it's about 1/4 of an inch thick around the outer edge, right where the binding goes. It's around 200 thousandths or less in the middle, and then it gets to the sweet spot and it's roughly 120 thousandths thick in the sweet spot. Those are just rough numbers. I actually refine them quite a bit more than that, but that just give you some idea. If you get down to those numbers, you'll start hearing a real good sounding instrument. I have all my little holes drilled in here where I take my measurements. I need to do that one more time here on this, and then I think we'll be pretty close. I've spent at least another hour just fine-tuning this top with the tooth blade in here and then with the scraper. And I'm getting very, very, very close now to the final measurements. It's very, very good. The best I can tell, the note has dropped at least 2 full notes. It used to be a C sharp that I have written here. Presently, it's a little harder to tell. It's not holding a particular note real well. But when it holds the note like that, it appears to be a B or a B flat. So from a C sharp to a B flat, yeah, it's a very long sustain, very nice note. You can't be too careful. The top is your most important piece. It's feeling really good. Sounding really good. It's very lightweight now. We'll weigh it when we get, just before we start to cut the sound, or put the braces in and the sound hole, just to have a good idea of the weight. Well, friends, to the best of my ability, I think I'm finished with the Florida top at this stage. Obviously, we've got F-holes and braces to put in it, obviously. But at this stage, prior to doing that, I believe I'm as good as I can get. Based on what I'm hearing, it's a B flat, and rings really good. Real happy with that note and everything. Best I can tell on my scale only goes down to a 2-gram resolution, so it fluctuates between 116 and 118, so I'm going to call it 117 as far as the grams, how much it weighs. Now all we have to do is do another one. I've spent several hours on the UK mandolin now working on this top, and it's real close. I think I probably got an hour to go yet. It's very, very close. One of the key measurements for me is I measure from the bottom of the ruler here. The ruler's sitting on the edges. This is the inside of the top. And you can see how much of a underbow there is there, or how much I've carved out of there. One of the key measurements is to measure that gap. I'm going to go ahead and give away that little secret measurement just so you have an idea. It's right at 400 thousandths of an inch. See a difference. I mean, they are really both very close to 400 thousandths of an inch. These are the closest to mandolins hand carved that I think you'll ever find. They're so close, it's unbelievable. But I do still have a little bit more work to do on this UK mandolin, and just, I'm just tweaking all the little high spots and the little feeling around and trying to feel the little bumps and, all that stuff. It gets kind of monotonous, if you will, but it's, on the other hand, in my opinion, you can't spend too much time carving the top. The top is everything. The back is important, don't get me wrong, but the top is everything. For the most part, I feel around until I find something that maybe a ridge or a bump, and then I just pull it out of there with this scraper. The scraper, it doesn't even cut 1/1000th of an inch at a time. I mean, it's very minute. And it gets rid of all the little scratches and the differences in the top. Got it just feeling really, really good. But on the other hand, it doesn't feel quite as smooth as the Florida mandolin yet, so the Florida one's got it beat on the smoothness right now. So that's what I'm doing, is I'm just going around working on this one and trying to get all the little minor details out of it. Most people, I don't think, would even feel the detail that I'm feeling here. It's just through, the fact that I've done it so much. I'm sure a blind person with their sense of feel could probably feel it no problem. I've got the thicknesses pretty darn close all over, although there's still a little bit of thickness in a place or two on this one, and that's what I'm working on also. I feel like I've got them as close as they'll ever be. You know, thicknesses are really, really close to what I want to get them to. Feel and the smoothness and all that is really, really close. There is a difference though, and that is that the weight of the UK mandolin is about 10 grams more than the Florida mandolin. Now 10 grams isn't that much. 10 grams is only 0.353 ounces. So it's not much. It's not even a full ounce difference. So they're very, very close. The other difference is there's a note difference. The Florida mandolin is at a B flat, which I like that a lot, to be honest with you. I think that's a good note. The UK mandolin is at an A. It's a lower note, which is kind of nice. It's one note lower than the other one. But on the other hand, the A is also an open string on the mandolin. Now, I don't think it's going to land on that because by the time we, put the bracing in here and cut the holes, I think those notes are going to change again. But just so you know, right now the only differences are the note, an A for the UK and a B flat for the Florida, and the weight is 10 grams more on the UK mandolin. This one weighs 116. This one weighs 126. I say that actually it's more like 9 grams now that I think about it, because I really call in this one 117 because it fluctuates between 116 and 18. So I'm calling this one 117. This one stays right on 126. So technically there's only 9 grams, which would even be a little less in ounces, obviously. So anyway, bottom line is they're as close as any two mandolin tops, I believe, can be carved by hand. They are incredibly close because, I just used this thousandths micrometer here all over the place, and I mean, they're really close. So calling them twin mandolins is not a problem. They really are twin mandolins as close as they can be. Well, I've got the UK mandolin up to the point where I'm almost ready to cut out the F-holes. You can see that I have the gauze glued on the inside. I have the braces in it and everything. So this one here is really close to having the F-holes put into it. This one, not so much. This is the UK mandolin that's ready for the F-holes. This is the Florida mandolin, and we're just getting ready to get into that process of putting these braces in here and all the other stuff. So I'll show you how I did that. For the braces, the treble side is just a little bit thinner than the bass side, so I want to make sure I get the right one in the right place. This one's a little bit thicker, this is a little bit thinner. Neither one of them are a full 1/4 of an inch. They're a little bit under that. What I do is I just have a little homemade deal. It's kind of hokey, but it works really good for getting very accurate lines. And we'll start with the base bar first. As you can see, this is just a block of wood with a hole through it. I insert the end of a pin through here, a ballpoint pin. You could use pencil lead or something, but this really works good. And I've been doing it this way a long time, and if something's working great, why change it? So then you just lay this on here, like so. And when you run it through there, you get a real good line. You can see the line there, I believe. So that's the base bar. What I also typically do is put an arrow that's the front. That you can't hardly screw that up. I mean, this is the thicker bar and it goes forward, so that's the way it goes. This is the thinner bar. And I always do it from the inside too, so I can tell which side the pencil lines are on. I usually go back across it too. The line usually is in the exact same place, as you can see, going across it twice. So it does a very accurate job. Now when I cut this out, I basically just leave the line. Again, I just put an arrow on this piece pointed that way, just so I don't get confused, but it's pretty easy to keep it straight. When I get back from the bandsaw, there was a little bit of a burr on the bottom side from pulling the fibers down, and I just take a piece of sandpaper and go across that corner to get rid of those little burrs. Take it and I line it up with my marks on the top here. I hold it up to a light is I'm holding this up and I'm looking through it, and I see a little bit of light almost all the way through except on the ends. Just on the ends it's being held up. So I take my little finger plane and very lightly, and mostly because this is dished, you kind of need to know to get it to stand up straight, because I want it to stand up perpendicular. So I want to cut it off of this upper side, or this as this disc goes up, then this would be the shorter side. And so the cuts that I make, I mostly want to cut on this outer side here. That, if that makes any sense to you. And anyway, that makes it stand up more perpendicular. So taking the edges off, and then I'm just going to very lightly score the outside edge all the way, but just very lightly, just to knock off that little sharp edge there so it'll set up more perpendicular. Get my arrow oriented in the right way. Look at it again, and I see that the ends still are kind of holding it up just a little bit, and I think that's going to get me close enough where I can go to sandpaper now, probably. So now what I do is I put the edge of the sandpaper just past the edge of where the stuff's going. So that edge now is my line where I want to be. I just put it in here and I just rock it very lightly back and forth like this, and just keep doing it. And I'm holding it up perpendicular to the top, and it should be better. It probably won't be there yet, but you just check it every little bit. It's not too bad, but it's still got a ways to go. So it's going to be a little while on that. Holding it up here to look at it. No, I honestly don't see a bit of light. I don't see it, not even any. And hopefully you can see how tight that joint fits there. And that's what you want. You want it just as tight as you can get it. So that one I'll set aside now, and I'll do the exact same process on the treble bar. I've got both sides fitting perfectly now. Can't see any light through them. They're just really fitting very, very well. So the next thing I do then is glue them in place, obviously using my Titebond Original. Healthy amount across there. Don't want much squeeze out, so you just want to make sure you got full coverage. That's really all you want. And you stick it down like that. It really sticks like a glove because it fits in that hole. I mean, you almost don't need clamps as good as it sticks, but I always clamp it, of course. I put a piece of leather under here, and I take a spring clamp. Some of these clamps work better than others too. When that thing starts spinning right there, it's hard to keep it on there. That looks real good, perfect squeeze out, little tiny amount all the way. Just looks wonderful. You couldn't do it any better, I don't think. That's as good as it gets. So we'll just let that set up for 3 or 4 hours, and we'll go on to the next step. I just put the glue on, kind of smear it in a little bit of a rectangle shape here around. So I haven't gone through my roll of gauze in 40 some instruments, and it feels like there's still plenty of gauze left in the box. It's a roll of tubular gauze, so I cut it off to length, then I just cut the edges off of the tube and pull it apart like that. You could use almost any fabric you want, I believe, would be fine. The gauze, I think, is very good. It's lightweight, it's airy, the glue goes through it really easily. That's one of the key things. I think if you're using a different fabric, you might want to pre-soak the fabric in the glue, something like that, to get the glue all through it. The glue goes right through this, no problem at all. If this has a fault at all, the gauze, it's that it's really stretchy. It's a pain in the neck to work with that way. I found taking just a little bit of water like this, having it handy, just dip your brush in it a little bit once in a while, and then paint the water on top of it like that. Just helps spread the glue around. Typically, I put glue back on top of here too. It may look like there's a lot of glue there, but it's not that much really. And you just want to spread it around, just kind of like you're painting, and just get a thin coat all over the whole thing. and you want the gauze to stick down good. I don't worry about the shape of the gauze too much. You can, with my little finger plane, I can cut off the excess gauze later and not even touch the wood really. So it's not a problem for me. I'm mainly just looking to make sure I don't see any dry spots, because you don't want any dry spots because those obviously wouldn't adhere. Some people would say, why would you do this? Well, the main reason you do this is to reinforce this F-hole. These points on the F-holes like to split out. It's better, like the grain is going across here like this. Well, this can split right here, and then this piece will fall off potentially. So if you put this around here and reinforce it, then that makes these corners much stronger. You don't get any splitting down through your F-holes like you could otherwise. Also, when you're sawing them out, it's even good reinforcement while you're sawing them out. So I like to put it on there, obviously, before I saw them out. Just about got it stretched to where I want it now. There it is. I think that'll do. Might just point out that when something like this, if it's in your way and you want to pick it up, you need to be careful how you pick it up. If you were to just pick this up in the middle here, the weight of these clamps is so heavy that it could potentially crack your top, because this top's very thin. It's very delicate right now. So when I pick this up, I make a point of getting my fingers in here like this, and I pick it up by the clamps. Then there's no weight to speak of on this. These clamps here are very lightweight, so they're not enough to be an issue. But these clamps are very heavy. So just pointing that out as something that might help you down the road. Be very careful about that. Be very mindful about how you might pick something like that up. It's been several hours. This has been drying. The next thing we need to do is carve these braces down. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and trim off this extra stuff. It just kind of bugs me that it's out there and in the way. And I'm just using my little finger plane, believe it or not. And I've used it before to do this, and you can see it just does a great job of just knocking off that little extra junk. And you can do it without even touching the wood, really. The stuff's pretty stiff after all the glue on it and everything, so it cuts pretty easy, actually. Wherever there might be a little bit of something sticking up there, I'm just cleaning it off. That looks pretty clean and pretty neat now. And same way over here, we'll clean this up. I believe that'll work. Might have to clean it up a little bit more as time goes on, but I think that looks pretty good overall. And I just cut the ends off first and take them down on a long taper down to the top. They're way too tall, but that's okay. It's just the way I typically do it. I could have made them shorter. I start with them 3/4 of an inch tall, so that leaves them plenty high. I just trying to be careful here as I go off to the end. I don't want to stab the top. And now that I've got that just kind of roughed out, then I'm just going to take and knock off some off the top of these, and I can do that with this chisel pretty fast. And you got to watch it, because if it were to start to drive down, you don't want to keep going. And this is cutting pretty flat and plain, and that's okay. I'm going to take it quite a ways down, so as long as it's not going down at an angle, I'm pretty happy with that. You can rough it out like that. That's just real rough. I could have cut that way down. There's no doubt about that, and it would have saved some time. And then this here, cut it down really fast after that. And you can just rip it off of there. It doesn't take but just a few seconds to get it down about where you want it. Good first place to start, roughed out like. Sometimes the wood cuts real easy. Other times, because of the way the grain's going, it might be a little harder to cut. That one there is a little hard to cut at that direction. Want to get them down to the point where they're not too tall and they're pretty slender. They're not, the bigger they are, the less they vibrate, I can tell you that. So you want to thin them down. Curious what the note is right now, so I think I'll test, since I've got them both almost to the same point. I got to clean off the extra stuff here, then I'll test the note and see what they sound like. Just thought I'd give you the stats on these right at the moment. You know, they're both exactly in the same state or shape. There's only a 7-gram difference in weight now, and the note is almost the same. I mean, they're both real close to a B flat still. So it's getting really close. I mean, it's getting closer and closer the closer we get to the end here. I hope that when we get the sound hole cut out, the F holes cut out, that they'll be exactly the same. Well, the process now is a little bit slow and tedious. You just have to take your time with a half-round file. And I'll show you what it looks like when we get her done. Both of them done, and not surprisingly, they look exactly identical. When you line them up like this, everything lines up just exactly the same. When you hit the note on them now, believe it or not, as far as I can tell, they're both B flat, which kind of amazes me that they both came to a B flat, but you know, I'm going to continue to work on that a little bit. It's kind of difficult to tell the note. The tuner, to be perfectly honest, fluctuates quite a bit. I need a better system for that, but it works pretty good. I think it serves my purpose. You know, to be perfectly honest with everybody, I'm basically carving it to those Lloyd Loar specs, to those Lloyd Loar measurements. And I'm kind of letting it do its own thing. You know, I pick out the best wood I can, I carve it the best way I can carve it. The rest of it kind of takes care of itself. They really have a good sustaining note. Hopefully you can hear the note. Very long sustained note. I'm happy with both of them. They're both just really nice. I think it's going to be two great mandolins when we get done. Well, I hope you've enjoyed seeing how these tops were made and the care that I take with each one of them. Part 2 coming up soon. We'll be building those backs.